When my boss caught me staring at his wife's medical files and threatened to fire me on the spot, I should have been terrified. Instead, I smiled and said 5 words that changed everything. I'm blind. You'll have to trust me. Before we dive, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. 3 years ago, I lost everything in a car accident. My sight, my career, my confidence. But what I gained in return was something far more powerful than vision. I developed the ability to hear lies, to remember every detail others missed, and to detect deception through the smallest changes in someone's voice. I became dangerous in ways that people who could see never imagined possible. My name is Celeste Rivera, and I'm 28 years old. I work as a medical transcriptionist at Blackwell Cardiac Clinic, where I spend my days converting audio recordings of patient visits into written reports. My boss, Dr. Hammond Blackwell, is a respected cardiac surgeon who owns the clinic. He's 45, methodical, and has a voice that betrays more than he realizes. His wife Octavia used to work as a pharmaceutical executive before she married into wealth and comfort. She's 42, with a laugh that rings hollow when she thinks, "No one is paying attention." The most important person in my world is my younger sister Indira. She's 24, works as a pharmacy technician, and has become my partner in navigating a world designed for people who can see. Where I lost my sight, Indira became my eyes. Where I developed supernatural hearing, she learned to spot the visual clues I miss. Together, we've become a team that most people underestimate completely. Dr. Blackwell hired me 8 months ago, reluctantly at first. He wasn't sure a blind person could handle medical transcription work, but I proved him wrong. What he doesn't know is that my disability gave me advantages he never considered. I catch inconsistencies in patient reports that sighted people miss, because they're distracted by what they see on the screen. I remember conversations word for word because my brain learned to compensate for my lost vision by becoming a perfect recording device. For weeks, I've been hearing strange conversations through the thin walls of the clinic, hushed phone calls about covering tracks, fixing problems, and managing irregularities. Dr. Blackwell's voice changes when he makes these calls. The confident surgeon disappears, replaced by someone nervous and desperate. I've been transcribing more reports than usual, many involving patients with oddly similar symptoms and identical treatment protocols. My instincts tell me something is wrong, but I haven't been able to piece together what. That morning started like any other. I was transcribing routine patient files when my screen reader software announced a name that made my blood freeze. Octavia Blackwell. Not unusual by itself, but the report detailed a severe heart condition requiring immediate surgery, dated 6 months ago. The problem? I heard Octavia laughing in the waiting room just yesterday, planning a European vacation with her husband. A woman with terminal heart disease doesn't plan month-long trips to climb the Swiss Alps. So when Dr. Blackwell found me at his computer and accused me of staring at his wife's private medical files, threatening to destroy my career and my life, I realized something important. He had no idea what I'd actually discovered. In his panic, he'd forgotten the most important thing about me. I can't stare at anything, but I can hear everything, remember everything, and detect every lie he's ever told. The question wasn't whether I was caught. The question was whether he was ready for what came next. 3 years ago, I was on track to become the youngest department head in the history of Metropolitan Medical Center. I had my master's degree in healthcare administration, a corner office with windows overlooking the city, and a future that seemed limitless. Then Jacob Martinez decided to drive home from a bar instead of calling an Uber, and everything changed in the span of 3 seconds. The accident took my sight, but it gave me something else entirely. In the months that followed, while I learned to navigate with a white cane and struggled with voice recognition software, my brain was rewiring itself in ways I never expected. I started noticing things that people with perfect vision missed, completely. The way someone's breathing changed when they lied, the subtle shift in vocal patterns that revealed anxiety or deception, the exact cadence of footsteps that told me who was approaching before they spoke. When Dr. Blackwell finally agreed to hire me 8 months ago, he made it clear that this was charity, not confidence. "We'll try this for 90 days, he said, his voice carrying that particular tone people use when they're doing something they're not sure about. If it doesn't work out, no hard feelings. What he didn't understand was that I wasn't asking for charity. I was offering him something better than any sighted employee could provide. My workspace at Blackwell Cardiac Clinic is a small office next to the break room, equipped with specialized software that reads medical reports aloud so I can transcribe them into digital files. The setup is perfect for what I do, but it's also perfect for something Dr. Blackwell never considered. The walls in this old building are thin, and sound travels in ways that people who rely on their eyes never notice. Indira picks me up from work most evenings, and she's become my partner in ways that go far beyond transportation, where I hear the lies people tell. She sees the visual cues that betray their secrets. Where I remember every word of a conversation, she notices body language and facial expressions that reveal the truth behind the words. We've learned to combine our observations in ways that make us formidable. "Something's wrong with your boss," Indira told me 3 weeks ago as we drove home. "He's been making a lot of phone calls in his car before he comes inside, and his wife has been showing up more often, but she always looks nervous." I'd been noticing the same things from an audio perspective. Dr. Blackwell's voice had been changing over the past month. The confident surgeon who hired me was being replaced by someone who jumped at unexpected sounds and spoke in hushed tones during private conversations. I'd been hearing fragments of phone calls through the walls, discussions about fixing problems, and managing situations that had nothing to do with patient care. The transcription work had been changing too. Instead of the usual variety of cardiac cases, I was processing reports that followed identical patterns. Patients with similar symptoms, identical treatment protocols, and outcomes that seemed almost choreographed. My memory, sharpened by years of compensating for lost vision, was detecting patterns that made my instincts scream warnings. But I didn't understand what I was seeing until that morning when Octavia Blackwell's name appeared in a medical report that should never have existed. The morning everything changed started with a routine transcription assignment. Dr. Blackwell had left 3 patient files on my desk, with a note asking me to prioritize them for insurance processing. I loaded the first audio file and began typing, as my screen reader announced the patient information. Then I heard a name that stopped my heart. Patient name, Octavia Blackwell. Date of birth, March 15, 1982. I paused the recording and asked my software to repeat the information. There was no mistake. This was Dr. Blackwell's wife, and according to the file timestamp, this examination had taken place 6 months ago. I continued listening as the report detailed severe coronary artery disease, multiple blocked vessels, and an urgent recommendation for triple bypass surgery. The prognosis was grim without immediate intervention. My hands trembled as I processed what I was hearing. Just yesterday afternoon, I'd been in the break room when Octavia arrived to pick up her husband. Her voice had been bright and energetic as she talked about their upcoming trip to Switzerland. "I can't wait to try that alpine hiking trail you found," she'd said to Dr. Blackwell. 3 weeks of mountain climbing is exactly what I need. A woman facing emergency heart surgery doesn't plan extreme physical activities in foreign countries. I needed to understand what I was dealing with, so I made a decision that would change everything. Using my knowledge of the office layout, I navigated to Dr. Blackwell's computer. My fingers found the keyboard and I activated the screen reader software that I'd helped him install months ago for accessibility compliance. What I discovered made my blood run cold. There weren't just multiple files for Octavia. There were dozens. Some showed her with terminal heart disease requiring immediate surgery. Others indicated she had a perfectly healthy cardiovascular system, with no abnormalities. The dates were scattered across the past year, creating a medical history that was completely contradictory. Some files showed her collecting disability payments for a condition that prevented her from working, while others cleared her for strenuous physical activity. As I scrolled through more files, I realized this wasn't limited to Octavia. Patient after patient had duplicate records showing conflicting medical conditions. Healthy individuals suddenly developed serious cardiac problems that qualified them for insurance payouts, then mysteriously recovered just enough to enjoy active lifestyles while continuing to collect benefits. The pattern was unmistakable once you knew what to look for. I was so focused on processing the scope of the fraud that I didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway until it was too late. The office door opened behind me, and Dr. Blackwell's voice filled the room with a fury I'd never heard before. "What the hell are you doing at my computer, staring at my wife's private medical information?" His voice was ice cold, loaded with an anger that made my skin crawl. "You're done here, Celeste. Pack your things and get out." In that moment, I realized that Dr. Blackwell had no idea what I'd actually discovered. Standing at Dr. Blackwell's desk, with his furious voice echoing through the office, I had 3 seconds to make a decision that would determine everything. I could apologize, claim I was confused, and let him fire me. I could confess what I'd discovered and hope he wouldn't destroy the evidence before I could report him. Or I could do something that went against every instinct I'd developed since losing my sight. I could lie. I turned toward his voice and smiled. The expression felt strange on my face because I knew he was watching my eyes, looking for the guilt and fear he expected to find. Instead, I gave him something he'd forgotten was impossible. "I'm blind, Dr. Blackwell. You'll have to trust me." The silence that followed lasted exactly 7 seconds. I counted them because I've learned to measure time by the rhythm of other people's breathing, and his breath was completely still. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed from fury to confusion. "What do you mean you're blind? I know you're blind, but you were looking at the screen. You were reading my wife's files." "I wasn't reading anything," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. "I can't read screens, remember? I was using the voice software you had me install for transcription work. The files you assigned me this morning included one with your wife's name, and the audio description mentioned some concerning cardiac information. I came to your computer to use the accessibility software to double-check if there was an error in the transcription." I watched his confusion through the changes in his breathing pattern and the subtle shifts in his voice. "You assigned me those files? The 3 priority cases on my desk. I always process them in the order you leave them." This part was true, which made my lie more convincing. When I heard Mrs. Blackwell's name in the audio, I thought there might be a mistake in the patient identification. I was trying to verify the information before I continued with the transcription. Dr. Blackwell moved closer, and I could hear him trying to process my explanation. His breathing had shifted from anger to something that sounded like panic mixed with hope. "What exactly did you hear in the audio file?" This was the moment where I had to make my performance perfect. Something about cardiac abnormalities and surgical recommendations. But it didn't make sense because I heard Mrs. Blackwell yesterday talking about your hiking trip to Switzerland. A person with serious heart problems wouldn't be planning mountain climbing, would they? "No," he said slowly. "They wouldn't." I sensed an opportunity and pressed forward. "Dr. Blackwell, I've been transcribing medical files for 8 months. I've noticed some inconsistencies in patient records lately, but I assumed they were filing errors or system glitches. I never understood what they meant." I paused, letting him absorb this. "Maybe I could help you identify where these errors are coming from. Fix the system problems before they cause real issues." The transformation in his voice was immediate. Relief flooded his words as he realized I was offering to be his unknowing accomplice rather than his accuser. "That would be helpful, Celeste. Very helpful." That evening, I stayed late at the clinic with Dr. Blackwell, supposedly helping him organize patient files to fix the system errors we'd discussed. What he didn't know was that I'd texted Indira from the bathroom, telling her to park outside and call the police if she didn't hear from me every 30 minutes. What he also didn't know was that my phone was recording everything from my jacket pocket. "The problem started about a year ago," Dr. Blackwell explained as we worked through the files together. His voice had the relieved quality of someone finally sharing a burden. "Octavia lost her pharmaceutical job when her company downsized. We had gotten used to a certain lifestyle, you understand. The clinic income was good, but not enough to maintain what we'd built." I kept my voice neutral and curious. "So the duplicate files were accidents from trying to manage the increased patient load?" "Not exactly," he said, and I heard him moving closer to my desk. "Octavia suggested we could supplement our income through insurance claims. She knew the system from her pharmaceutical background. She understood how to create conditions that would qualify for substantial disability payments. My blood chilled as he continued. We started with Octavia's files as a test case, created documentation for a severe cardiac condition that would prevent her from working but wouldn't require constant medical supervision. The insurance company paid out 6 months of disability benefits before we had her miraculously recover, enough to live normally. And the other patients? I asked, my fingers finding the photo button on my phone to capture documents he was showing me. Wealthy clients who wanted the same arrangement. They pay us a percentage of their insurance payouts in exchange for medical documentation that supports their claims. Everyone wins. His voice carried the satisfaction of someone who believed he'd found the perfect crime. I was getting everything I needed. But then Dr. Blackwell's tone shifted. Celeste, how did you know to ask about the other patients? I never mentioned them. The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. I realized my mistake immediately. In my eagerness to gather evidence, I'd revealed knowledge I shouldn't have possessed. You're not as helpless as you pretend to be, are you? His voice was moving around the room now, and I could hear him positioning himself between me and the door. You've been listening to my private conversations. You know exactly what we've been doing. I stood up slowly, my hand finding my white cane. Dr. Blackwell, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding was mine, he said, his voice turning cold and dangerous. I thought hiring a blind employee would be safe. I thought you couldn't see what I was doing. But you hear everything, don't you? Every conversation, every phone call, every detail I thought was private. The office felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. But I'd spent 3 years learning to navigate spaces in complete darkness. This was my territory now. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about strength and vulnerability. Dr. Blackwell lunged toward me, trying to grab my phone and delete the evidence I'd gathered, but he made the same mistake everyone makes when they encounter someone who's learned to live without sight. He assumed darkness was my weakness. I moved through that office like I owned it, using my cane and my memory of the space to stay ahead of him while he stumbled over chairs and crashed into filing cabinets. 3 years of navigating the world without vision had taught me that darkness wasn't my enemy. It was my ally. When the lights went out, I was still myself. He became helpless. You can't escape, Celeste, he shouted, his voice growing desperate, as he tried to corner me. No one will believe you. You're just a disabled employee with a grudge. That's when I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Police sirens getting closer by the second. Indira had kept her promise. Dr. Blackwell, I said, stopping near the door as the sirens reached the parking lot. You're right about one thing. I am disabled. But you made the mistake of thinking that made me weak instead of different. You assumed I couldn't see your crimes because I couldn't see your face. You never considered that losing my sight taught me to hear lies, to remember details, and to detect deception in ways that people with perfect vision never develop. The police entered the clinic just as Dr. Blackwell made one final attempt to reach me. They found him on the floor, having tripped over his own desk chair, while I stood calmly by the door with a phone full of recorded confessions and photographed evidence. 3 months later, Dr. Blackwell and Octavia were sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for insurance fraud, totaling over $800,000. 12 wealthy patients were also implicated in the scheme, their fraudulent claims exposed through the evidence I'd gathered that evening. The insurance company that prosecuted the case offered me a reward that changed my life. With that money, and the confidence I'd gained from proving my abilities, I started Rivera Forensic Audio, a consulting business that helps organizations detect fraud through voice analysis and pattern recognition. It turns out that my disability had given me a superpower that companies desperately needed. Indira became my business partner, combining her visual observations with my audio expertise to create something neither of us could have achieved alone. We've helped expose embezzlement schemes, identify lying employees, and detect deception in ways that traditional investigators miss. But the most important thing I learned wasn't about business or justice. It was about perception. Dr. Blackwell saw a disabled employee he could manipulate and dismiss. He never saw the person who had learned to survive by paying attention to every detail he thought he could hide. People see what they expect to see, and their expectations become their blind spots. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from being underestimated. Sometimes the person others consider helpless is the most dangerous person in the room.